Hi y'all, welcome to the garden. It is cloudy right now, so it's the perfect time to come out and shoot a video and talk about the things I've accomplished this past week. You watched me put up the fountain Monday, it's Saturday. I spent the rest of the week planting most of my annuals. I only have a flat of a few things left. There's a flat of some smaller decorative dahlias for containers and stuff, but I'm going to be planting those in the landscape, and then a flat of short decorative zinnias that are not intended like for cutting or not really tall. So I think I'm going to plant them on the fence side over there where it's kind of empty, because I have come to a point at the front garden that it is almost full to the extent where I don't feel comfortable planting a whole lot more in it right now until I get some better opportunity to come through and do some more designing, particularly on this side and the pathway and stuff. So I really need to figure out what I'm going to do there, and I think I'm going to do some decorative stepping stones, and then I can plant around it and make it a little more cottagey in that area. But I don't want to plant anything that's going to be too imposing and require me to dig it up later. So we'll take a look at the front garden bed, how it's coming along. I also got the rose wall planted when did I do that? Last Saturday, I think I got up early and planted that. So we'll show you how that's progressing. It has its first blooms. I'm getting my first blooms from the heirloom roses that I planted both on the rose wall, which I'm so blown away by how quickly those climbing roses are growing. And then the poet's wife is one of the first ones to bloom in the front garden right here, and I'll show you that. It's a tiny bloom right now. It's probably not been getting as much water as it wants, so it's struggling a little bit. I also want to show you some proven winners plants that I'll be planting, and some I've already planted for 2025. Some of them are brand new, not quite released. Some of them were released and you can probably find them in your garden centers locally. And some of them are just new to the market, and so it may take a year or so for them to filter down to your local garden centers. But a lot of these you can still order online, particularly greatgardenplants.com. And so let's turn around and look at all these beautiful things that I've got done this week. So I've been slowly weeding areas as I've been planting them up, and then I need to come back through and weed some of the other areas. So these were some of the early areas that I planted at the beginning of May, late April, and there's some more weeds that have popped up here. Weeds in a new garden bed, this one I'm having issues because the mulch had a lot of weeds in it apparently when I got it. You can see a lot of these same little bushes here. I'm not sure exactly what they are, but they have been a pain, and they've been all throughout this mulch. And I know it was the mulch because over there next to where I planted or assembled the fountain, I used a mix of bag mulch and this mulch there, and everywhere I have bag mulch there are no weeds, and everywhere where I'd put some of the extra bulk mulch there are weeds. So that's just because I think I got his last batch of the year, and so it may have been sitting there a little bit. It was really late October when I got it in, or mid to late October, and it had probably just collected some weed seeds over time. So still focusing on getting drip irrigation. After I finish this video and eat dinner, I'm going to come out here and work on more drip irrigation for all of the things I planted this week. But having the drip irrigation has certainly helped these plants. They're still struggling a little bit as they get rooted in, but I want them to struggle a little bit, surprisingly, so they will establish a root system. I don't want to have to baby these too much, and I want them to be able to get enough water that they need from the drip that is near them. So if their root system will expand a little bit and grow towards the drip irrigation where that water's coming, that will be good, and they will be better plants for it this year, and the perennials will be better in future years. A little update on the Truffula Pink Gomphrena. The rabbits have stopped bothering them, or whatever was eating has stopped bothering them. They're actually starting to rebloom again. I did come back out and put a little bit more 𝗍𝗟𝗦𝗡 down. So there's recovering pretty well. It'll take them a little bit. I've shot them with a little bit of fertilizer, and they're starting to bush back out a little bit. So hopefully these will recover well. I did plant the rest of the Gomphrena next to the bench over there, and I'll show you that when we get over that way. But this rose from Heirloom Roses, the Poet's Wife, it looks a little rough because it's its first bloom and it's not completely full open, but this is one of my favorite yellow roses. As this gets a little more established this summer, it will really put on a show. But these first initial roses, I mean, this is a baby plant, are really tiny, but they get pretty big as this thing gets established a little more. The lavender's looking really good, and budded out really nicely. These sun patients, I think, can take the sun much better. These are compact rows than the pink ones, which was blush pink or orchid pink down there that I showed you next to the lamppost. So just in my experience, these have been out here in more sun and they're still blooming pretty well, and they're starting to get settled in a little better. I didn't put the drip quite as close to them, so really a good test on how well these will perform. And I still think they're looking pretty good. They're lost a little bit of blooms over the past few days, but coming along nicely still. Still got the yarrow that's about to bloom. This is Firefly Peach Sky yarrow. The catmint's starting to come up a little more, and now you can see how Chartreuse this is. This is Chartreuse on the loose. I'm having a lot of issues with Nutsedge in this bed, and I don't really understand why, because I didn't remember seeing it here last year when this was lawn, and there's not been a ton of water in the area, but Nutsedge has always been the bane of my existence. It's really difficult to control and manage, and hopefully I can tackle it this season and not have as many issues in the future. But I'm really loving this goldy color that the Chartreuse on the loose is getting now that it's coming up. They've actually started putting on tiny, tiny blooms there. I planted some sage, just some regular Bergarten sage here in this area. There is a little bit of a gap here, but I'm not terribly dedicated to planting anything in this space yet. What I really want to get is all the drip irrigation in and this bed entirely mulched, because right now there's a lot of beautiful things in it, but until there is just an even layer of a color of brown mulch throughout, it's kind of hard and it looks a little busy to see where I have emptiness at. So it's difficult for my eye to see where I can tuck stuff here and there, and that's going to be the thing about this bed. I've bulk planted a lot of plants, but I'll be gathering things over the next couple months and over the next couple years to kind of tuck in spaces here and there as I get a feeling for how these plants are performing, and just where there's going to be issues or small things like these hydrangeas. They're little lime punch. They're a smaller paniculata, and they're growing a little smaller this year than I thought they might. So I could probably put annuals in here if I wanted to, but I'm done planting annuals for the year pretty much, and so we'll just let these fill out. I'll fertilize them really well this season, so they'll put on a lot of growth for next year, and hopefully they will come along really nicely and fill out, if they don't a whole lot this year, next year in this space. This Veronica Ever After, I'm really loving the color of it. One of the things I'm going to be doing this evening is trying to get drip irrigation onto this part of the bed here, so that's going to include the heuchera river, because these things, I told you these heuchera by Proven Winners will knock your socks off, how quickly they grow. And you can see how much new growth these have put on, and I have not actually overhead watered this section of the bed in over a week. So they're holding their own really quickly. The root system's bulking up quite a bit. You can tell by how little some of them are burning. Some of the yellow ones still have some burn on them, but all of the new foliage looks incredibly great. So after I get drip irrigation on it and let these leaf out a little more, I can come through and pick off those burnt leaves, and it'll look even better. Here you can see the fountain from this back space here. I don't know if I included much footage in the video of me installing that, but I really love it. You might be able to hear it in the background depending on how well the microphone's picking that up, but I really like it. We have some salvia down here. This is purple Perfusion, and they are covered up with bees as well. So a lot of these things have come into the bloom since the last time I shot a video in this area. So really excited about these. This summer gold maple, which I took from the last house that I ordered from Mr. Maple several years ago, is also performing incredibly well in full, almost all day sun. Not a shred of burning, and it was of course just planted here last fall. We've got another rose here. This is Distant Drums. It's coming along slowly. After I get drip on it today, I think it'll start growing a little better. And I'm hoping it's got some buds on it. They'll start blooming here pretty soon. But one of my favorites as well. Lots of nice colors in there. All right, we're just gonna come along the back side here. I filled in a lot of the empty space here with the rest of the begonias that I had. So just some purple or red leaf begonias, dark leaf begonias that are white and pink alternating. Some of them were kind of tiny and had looked a little rough because I'd kept them in their little packets too long, and a lot of the things that I had left over were a little wet because I had kept them in shade just so they didn't dry out and die. But that caused a little bit of detriment there on the opposite end of staying too moist. So they'll recover in a few days. I haven't watered them since I planted them yesterday evening, allowing them to dry out a little bit, but I am gonna come through, do drip irrigation tonight. I don't know how far I'll get into this bed, but in the next 2 days, I want to finish this bed so I can move on to other projects. And I will probably overhead water this bed as well. I went through and removed all the weeds with my handy dandy Rogue hoe down here at the bottom that I love so much. And I actually left it in the bed overnight, which I am not typically do, and I forgot to grab it as I went inside yesterday evening. But all of this stuff is looking really good. The dark side of the moon astilbes are coming up. More of the Chartreuse on the loose catmint here, and the Salvias, and the classic coral dianthus. And over here, so you can see this area here, I've kind of left blank where the pathway to the yard is going to be. And I'll fill this out throughout the summer as I have a little more time and think more about this space as far as design. But right now, I just want to wrap up the rest of the bed so it can start filling in and looking beautiful. This is a Ruby Slippers Oakleaf Hydrangea, which I don't know that I've showed very much on video or talked about, but it's a really early blooming oakleaf, and it's really beautiful. It starts changing color pretty soon. It's first day of June, so give it a little bit longer, and then it'll be looking really, really nice. And then I finished planting some begonias in here along with some sun patience repetition. Here is the Truffula Pink Gomphrena, which I need to get some water to. It's dried out a little bit. So these plants are in a little bit of shock because they were really wet in the shade, and I brought them out into the sun this week. It has been cooler temperatures this week, but still they're gonna take a little transition period for a week or two before they start acclimating better. And up here at the front of the bed, after I got the fountain installed Monday evening, I came out and put drip irrigation here and planted all of these sun patience. So you can see they're turned a little white too, the blooms have, where they've been transitioned to the sun. So they will acclimate much quicker because these are on much more drip irrigation. And this area stays a little wetter because it's not as in much shade during the week or during the day. So down here at the front, I didn't plant any because I do have a little layer of catmint. This is 𝗏𝗟𝗡𝗧, so it's a mini variety, and they're just now starting to pop up. They may not look like a whole lot this year. The bare roots that I got were a little smaller than what I had ordered, but they gave me twice as many, so they may be a little small this year. But I do want to start showing you some of the shrubs for 2024, 2025 that you can find from proven winners. And the first one here is one I picked up at Stockslager several weeks ago, and it is 𝗍𝗜𝗏𝗏 hydrangea. It is a macrophylla, but it is a reblooming macrophylla, and it has this beautiful pink blooms here. So this one too is getting a little bit more sun, and the blooms were gorgeous a couple days ago, and now they've got a little crunchy, but they'll be okay. I just received another one from proven winners, and so I planted it here on the other side, so that beautiful pink color will be on both sides of the sidewalk. We have some more hydrangeas, so I'm trying lots of macrophyllas and hybrids this year and in this garden since I have so much space. This is Let's Dance Lovable, which I've showed you before. I have one in the back shade garden under the crabapple. It needs a little bit of water. These were just planted yesterday. This is one of my favorite new varieties, and I actually recommended it to my mom, so you know if I recommended it to my mom, I believe it's going to be a good one. And she went and purchased a bunch of them locally at a garden center near her. She got 8, I believe, and I'll just pop a picture on the screen. She sent them to me the other day. They are going to be really reliable rebloomers for quite a long time, I think. So they're tiny right now. We should get some blooms out of them over the season. And right here, they'll be in a lot of sun. They are going to be on drip irrigation. I'm going to run it often. This is the Rising Sun Redbud, and it's put on quite a bit of growth this year. These things, the first year, I had one in the last garden. The first year, they can look a little rough, just as a lot of trees do when they're acclimating and they're small. But in the second and third year, they really shined in my last garden, so I'm excited to see how those will look in the future. We have down here, I planted 4. One I got from Great Garden Plants last year. These are a new exciting evergreen that could be a good boxwood alternative for you if you are having issues with your boxwoods. And this is a 𝗧𝗛𝗘𝗧𝗦. It's called Sweet and Low. It is a tiny shrub. It doesn't get very tall. It grows into kind of a natural ball shape. It does do a little suckering from the ground, from what I've heard. I've not experienced any of that yet because these are new, but the color and the leaf shape of them are really beautiful, and they have little tiny white blooms on them during the season that are pretty inconspicuous. But you can see this one, this is the one I planted last year. It's just now starting to put on some new growth, and I think it'll catch up to these new ones that I just planted. It stayed really vividly green during winter, even at such a small size. And you know, a lot of boxwoods can turn that brownish color. So if you want something that stays pretty strikingly green, we're going to be testing these out obviously for another winter. I'm going to start implementing more of these in the garden if they do well. I have heard that they like a lower pH soil, but we're just going to trial them here. We can tend to have a little higher than average pH, and Southwest Ohio, both at my last garden and this new garden seems to as well. But we're going to test them out and see how they do. I planted another shrub over here by the 𝗩𝗜𝗗𝗘𝗧𝗦 lovable hydrangeas, and it's called 𝗍𝗑𝗍𝗑𝗧𝗏𝗍𝗑𝗍𝗑𝗍𝗑𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍 found the last one that I planted in the last garden. It was not a Proven Winners variety. It kind of struggled its first winter, but I planted it late. So this one's supposed to be hardy here, and it should be evergreen. We will test and see how evergreen it is, but I really like the leaf color. It's a nice, different variegated green, yellow, and orange, and it kind of shows this and exhibits this all throughout the season. So it gets roughly 2 to 3 foot tall and wide, so it's a smaller shrub you can tuck in everywhere, and a good alternative if you need some color, kind of evergreen in your garden. So it'll be right here along the corner or the edge of this path, this walking path that I'll put in through the bed. We need to come out and get some water on some of these things. We might actually get some rain. Look out there, it's looking a little dark, but the perfect time to shoot a video. So this is a hydrangea it's a new variety of hydrangea called the Cascade from Proven Winners. So it does not bloom on new wood, it blooms on old wood. So here in zone 6, these were sent to me to try out again. In Michigan, when I went and visited last year to the Proven Winners trial gardens, it was performing incredibly well and blooming really well. So the climate in Michigan along the river is a little different than it might be in Ohio. All of those shrubs are a little protected by the lake effect, and so although it gets cold there, it's a very interesting climate. Here, we're going to test and see if these will reliably rebloom for me. They're supposed to have really hardy buds, but the first one I planted that was introduced into this series called 𝗩𝗟𝗡𝗢𝗢 died on me in my last garden, but it was planted late as well. So this is going to be planted in the spring right now. I've got another one called 𝗩𝗟𝗡𝗢𝗢𝗡. This is 𝗩𝗟𝗡𝗢𝗡 green, I believe. And we'll see how well they perform this season as they get settled in and see if they rebloom for me next season. I planted a new boxwood from Proven Winners, and it's just a baby. It's called 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗡, and it's supposed to stay really small and compact. So I placed it right next to the sidewalk here along with these supertunias. I will try and keep the supertunias off of it if they get too vigorous. They're growing really well to be put in the ground for me. So we'll keep it protected a little bit from the massive supertunia as it continues to grow. This Japanese maple that I showed you in a video a few days ago or a few weeks ago, I'm gonna have to pull out, I think. I think it completely died on me, and so I'll have to find something to replace it, and I'm not sure what that will be right yet. But It happens sometimes with transplants. This one came from the last garden, pulled it out in July of last year, of course, so it was kind of rough on it. Got it planted in the fall, and we had a really bad drought here after I moved into this place throughout the year, and the ground was so hard to dig in, so I imagine it had a tough time getting established in the fall, even though a lot of these other things that I planted in the fall seem to have returned pretty well. So you never know what what's gonna happen when you transplant a shrub, and sometimes there are losses, and you just move on and find something to replace it. I placed the Fairy Trail White Hydrangea behind these reminiscent coral roses there, so that's where that one went. Also, let's just appreciate this container again. It's been planted for 3 weeks. Is that right? I got these on the May 9th. So right around 3 weeks. And you already cannot see soil completely filled out. So we got the 𝗩𝗜𝗗𝗘𝗢𝗡𝗧. This is large lilac, I think, verbena, and snow princess alyssum. So rather simple container, 3 of each, and then 1 𝗩𝗑𝗗𝗘𝗏𝗏. And I really love this combination, how it's coming together. And it's the first day of June, and this already looks incredible. All right, I've got a couple more shrubs to show you, and then we're gonna go check out all of the roses because they're coming along really nicely, and I'm excited to show you. All right, so check this out. I've showed you this one before because I have one, but mine has not started showing all of its coloring yet. And this is a new variety called 𝗩𝗜𝗗𝗘𝗧 Mock Orange. Here's the tag down here at the bottom. And when I unboxed this, it kind of just blew my mind. We got the white blooms and the yellow variegation. It was just really striking, and it's going to be a really nicely sized shrub. I think it's 4 foot tall and wide average. You can control it a little bit with pruning, of course, but it was just really striking unboxing it. So I wanted to show you again this shrub that's newer to the Proven Winners program. Also, these are gonna be some of my favorites, I think. So these are camellias. There's 2 of them. I requested both of them. I think Proven Winners came out with 3 varieties this year. One is called 𝗗𝗜𝗚𝗏𝗡𝗦, and so you can see there, they're tiny right now, but we can't grow many camellias in Zone 6, and the camellias that are out there for Zone 6 aren't necessarily my favorite. So this one has a beautiful double flower that is a mauve color, obviously. And this one's really interesting because all of the new foliage that it pushes out is red. So there's not any new growth on it yet, but as this starts growing in, I will show you what that looks like. These are designated for around the fence, and that's why I haven't planted them yet. I gotta have the tractor come back in so I can spread some mulch in that area. I'm hoping I can get it back soon, and then I'll spread mulch in that area and get these planted in the next couple weeks so they can start getting established. But this one's already started to put on a little bit of growth since it arrived this week. Look at those new leaves there. Really excited about these varieties. And then I have a new one called Kinsley Ghost Honeysuckle. So this isn't a new variety to the market. This is something Proven Winners added to their program because it's just a great honeysuckle. So at the small age right now, it doesn't look too spectacular, but as it continues to grow, it looks very much like eucalyptus, and it takes on this bluer color foliage. So this one will also be taken and placed next to the fence on the back side. So I'm going to be filling that with lots of good shrubs, interesting shrubs. Of course, camellias can get pretty big, so those will be going there as well. And hopefully that will allow me to have some beautiful blooms in the dead of winter here. All right, before we get to the roses, I want to show you one tree just for some appreciation of this variety. This plant has been a struggle for me. You know, I purchased one several years ago online. It showed up. It had hardly any root system and it died on me. I ordered another one. When was that? In 2022. I planted it in like October of 2022. We listed the house in May of 2023, and I dug it up before we listed the house because I loved it and I wanted to bring it with me. Well, I planted it last fall here, and it's looking really beautiful. This is the Carolina Sweetheart Redbud, and The color on this thing, the first year I had it, it did not produce this much interesting color. But now that it's 2 years, or it's a little more established, you can see all those brilliantly bright pink new growth. As it ages, the leaves turn green, and they also get this variegation on them. So there's just like, it seems like every leaf on this tree is super unique. And I'm going to come through and stake it because it's leaning a little bit out, which redbuds are, you know, not the strongest trunk trees, and they are kind of thin and spindly sometimes until they get really established. But I want this one to grow really upright, so I'm going to stake it here. So it'll be really beautiful and striking here next to the pool area. All right, we got the rose wall planted. It was really easy to plant. It didn't take me very long. The soil here is really fluffy, surprisingly to me. Planting in this garden has been much more of a joy than my last one. The soil here is so much better. It's still clay, but it's not quite as heavy as the last garden in some areas, and some areas of the garden is much more of a loam type. But I'm blown away by how quickly these James Galway roses from Heirloom Roses have grown. Now, Heirloom Roses does recommend you plant your roses within a week of receiving them in their containers. I've held these over for a full month before I got them planted. That was primarily because I didn't have the space ready for them yet. And they were getting water twice a day in my shrub bay behind the barn, which I've moved to the side of the barn now on the concrete so I could trim the grass back there. But I think because they were getting very consistent water back there behind the barn, regular water, they grew incredibly quickly. It could also be because this is just a really vigorous variety as a climbing rose, but it was also the first one to bloom. And I actually missed it back here when it was in the shrub bay. It started blooming in its container. And you can see it's put on a ton of buds already, and I'm about to start getting more buds. So out of all the roses that I got this year, these are some of the more vigorous ones it's looking like, and I'm really excited about that. But let's show you the bloom right here. It's not completely opened. It started opening yesterday as I came out here, but this very delicate, soft pink color. I'm loving it. So I was originally going to think that I needed to wait a little bit before I started putting up the strings between these posts, but I think that day is going to come quicker than I thought based on how vigorously these are growing. So if you've been following along, we painted these posts black. They had never been painted before, and I'm going to come through and put some black vinyl coated wire all the way up to form like this giant 40-foot trellis. That's how long this area is, and they're going to grow up. These roses get about 11 foot tall. That's what they're estimated to get. These posts happen to be perfectly 11 foot tall as well. And so they will form a huge wall of pink blooms that also these roses have few thorns. And so that's one of the reasons I picked this variety. They can also grow more easily in a shady area, and this is the north side of the barn, but it's probably still going to be considered maybe a full sun area depending on what the time of the year and how much light it's getting. But I'm really excited to see this grow up and how many blooms it's going to pump out this year, because I wasn't expecting as much growth as it's put on now. I mean, I've had these a month, and you can see they're already twice as big as they were when I got them. The shrub bay has actually shrunk a lot, and I don't have a whole lot left to plant. I've got mostly stuff that is going to be going around the fence, so when I get the tractor back, I can plant that. A few perennials down here at the bottom. And I think I'm going to plant this patio peach, the Bonfire patio peach, behind the fence as well, because it has beautiful foliage. It's more of a decorative tree, although it is producing peaches. Some have fell off, but we've got some peaches in there. All right, let's go wrap this up in the cut flower garden, where there have been some developments in the irrigation, and I just want to show you the roses because the foliage on some of them is really striking, and I'll show you what I kind of prefer in a rose. You might can see back there as we head to the cut flower garden. Eventually, I hope to not be able to see through this fence as the hydrangeas grow up and I get the back planted, but I did get ferns hung with drip irrigation to them on the back deck. So that looks way better from back here. So we're getting some sprinkling of rain now, but a lot of these roses are like on the cusp of blooming. So maybe in the next week, I will have some bloom. Some of the buds on them are pretty fat, And I just want to show you just kind of some differences between rose foliage. So some rose foliage is dull, some shiny, some's light green, some's dark green. I prefer a really dark green leafed rose that is really glossy in most cases. And this one right here is just really striking to me. This is, which one is this one? This is Apricots and Cream, which I substituted for one that I couldn't get this year. So I just love the way that looks. Looks, the new growth is red and it's dark green and super glossy compared to some of the others here. See, this one right here is also looking good, and it is the purple one, I believe. Yeah, Plum Perfect, and it is not quite as glossy, but it still produces beautiful blooms. So roses, although they're selected for their blooms, you can also select them for their foliage type. And each bloom or each rose has a little bit different foliage, which is interesting. This one right here is pumping out some buds. Which one is this? Oh, Sunset South Africa, of course. It had excellent reviews. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4, probably more than that I missed. 4 buds on it. And it also has really nice foliage too. This is a yellow to orange rose, more of a yellow color. And I'm really excited to see this one because, you know, Poet's Wife is one of my favorite, and it's a yellow rose. So I'm really expected to kind of really love this one. And if I really like it in the cut flower garden, I will probably acquire one and plant it somewhere in the ornamental garden. But you can see I did get drip irrigation on these roses, and they've been a lot happier since I did that. This is the standard 1/2-inch tubing that I use in the rest of my flower beds because I only needed it on each shrub. But I came through and put drip tape, which is a flat tubing, in the cut flower garden because these are all row crops. So the drip tape actually goes flat. You can see it here. And when it gets water in it, it swells up. So this tubing goes off a couple times a day, I think for 20 minutes or so. And it has also closer increments. I think they may be every 6 inches it releases some water. And it's very similar to the drip tubing that you can get for ornamental, or what I use for ornamental gardening in the flower beds, but it doesn't really bend. And so you have to be kind of restricted to using it in row crops, but I put it on everything now. Some of these things have not had any overhead water. All they've survived on is rainwater since I planted them. Most of these being yarrows and veronicas and phlox. So you can tell how drought tolerant those things are, being that they did not get any overhead water. You can see the sprinkler there, the overhead water that I was, but it only covered these annuals here and the dahlias. So none of these yarrows had gotten overhead water, and they were never even watered in, I think, after I planted them. And you can see how well they're performing. This Peter Cottontail yarrow is starting to bloom here, and it's looking really cute. So I should start being able to create some mini tiny flower arrangements with some of the things in here. And in the middle of June, I'm going to come out after I finish all of this other stuff, and I think plant some zinnias in this area that I have available directly from seed. I'm going to try and direct sow them. Now that I will have all of my water things done and a lot of stuff planted in the ground, I can transition to more kind of relaxing projects and grow some things on. Still got to get cattle panels for the dahlias, but they're coming up really nicely. I think almost every one of them came up, but 2. I was counting them the other day, and I was missing 2 or 3 that did not sprout from their tubers, but that's pretty good overall. And in this bed, I don't know that I mentioned it ever. I think I've mentioned it in a video when I was talking about the things I was getting for the cut flower garden, but this is an ornamental mint called mountain mint, green mountain mint, and its Latin name is 𝗖𝗢𝗎𝗄𝗏 mudicum. So it's a clustered mountain mint is what it's called, and it has really nice foliage for cut flowers. So it's often grown for cut flowers, and it doesn't look great right now because it's just starting to shoot out, but as it gets more established, I need to come fertilize this bed because I just put soil in it. I didn't actually add any fertilizer, and these greens, these leaves look a little nitrogen deficient. So I need to come fertilize, and then this will grow in, and I put it in a bed. It's not supposed to be quite as invasive as like a regular mint, but I put it in a raised bed just in case. I would have preferred a 32-inch tall bed, but I didn't have one, and I didn't want to fill it with that much soil. So if it starts becoming too aggressive, then I'll have to deal with that somehow. But for now, I think it'll be okay in this size bed. It's still 17 inches above the ground. I know mint can be pretty invasive, but we're gonna give it a chance without having to deal with it too much. It is really cool out here with the wind blowing and a little bit of sprinkling. If it does it, I hope it clears up quickly so I can get out here and work in the garden this evening. But as you can see, I think it's coming along pretty nicely, getting things buttoned up. The vision that was there last fall and winter is starting to show up a little bit. I will probably not get to mulching everything until late June. I've really got to get the tractor in. But I am going to visit Heirloom Rose's headquarters in mid-June, and so I'll be there. So that's a week out of the garden. And that's one reason I have been in such a panic mode of getting everything planted and drip irrigation in so it can be taken care of for the days that I'm out of the garden. So this is really exciting progress, and I'm excited to watch it continue to grow on this season. Thank you guys for joining me for this garden walk, and remember, be a light. Take care. Bye.